Hello.
Welcome. I am Joyce Lee, Chair of the Environment and Climate Network. Welcome and hello for you to all join today. We are thrilled for the program that is coming ahead of us and would like to tell you a little bit about our latest website update. It is a great resource called the Sustainable Exhibition Design and Construction Toolkit. It is for museum professionals and for designers. You can also see the web link on the screen right now. Inside this document, you can see that on page 4 and 5, it is also a green materials pledge, so that we can all be encouraged to pick fabrication and materials that are more sustainable, socially conscious, healthy, and low carbon. So we envision a greener world for our museum sector. Therefore, if you and your organization believe that it is a sound principle, we invite you to pledge with your organization's logo. We are very grateful to Douglas Fendrell of Cambridge 7, and his email address is on page 6 of this document. Remember, don't worry about perfect. Work towards better. We know that if we all do it together, we'll have a greener museum sector. With that, I'm going to turn over to Andrea Fraley for the wonderful program today.
Thank you so much, Joyce. And we highly encourage you to check out this resource. It's a wonderful source for how you can make your institutions more green. So thank you guys in advance. And without further ado, we are here today to talk to you about 60 sustainable ideas in the sustainable museums. We're calling it the tour. We're going to tour you through a lot of different thoughts and suggestions, tips, tricks that can hopefully help you advance your sustainability efforts at your location. So I'm very excited to be here. My name is Andrea Fraley. I'm the Vice President of Marketing and Communications with Event Network. I'm even more excited about the illustrious group of panelists that I have with me today. We have Dr. Chris Hobbs, the Curator of Sustainability at the Bernice Bishop Museum in Honolulu, Hawaii. Deborah Lucking, Director of Sustainability at Fentress Architects out of Denver. Carter O'Brien, the Sustainability Officer for the Field Museum in Chicago. And Leslie Tom, the Chief Sustainability Officer at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History in Detroit. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. We're really excited to share all your wonderful thoughts. We know sometimes two of the biggest inhibitors on being able to get anything done really is how much is it going to cost me and how hard is it going to be able to do. So we put together these kind of fun icons for you that each slide and each idea will have a cost associated with it, along as well as the easy, medium, hard icon. So you can get an idea for time and bandwidth. We've also chunked up our thoughts into 4 different themes. We have facilities, operations and administration, culture, and community engagement. So we know everybody's job we all wear different hats, but we hope you'll be able to take a different piece from each of the ideas to implement at your location. So without further ado, we're going to start with facilities and our first idea, which I believe is Mr. Carter O'Brien at the Field Museum.
Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us. So building envelopes, this is sort of a pretty standard practice to take a look at your envelope and see what you can do in terms of making sure that all of the air that you're carefully conditioning for your artifacts, animals, and your people are staying where you want it. We know that museums have specific challenges sometimes because they can be historic and landmarked properties. And so, they can be a little difficult to make, quick adjustments to the outdoors. Here's an example, though, of one thing that you can do, which is non-intrusive, and that's thermal imaging. This was a project we did a couple of years ago in conjunction with the University of Illinois, and they actually provided the service for us at no charge. So that's another option for you. It does allow you essentially, to take a peek behind the walls if you're careful. In our case, our building is located on the shore of Lake Michigan, and we do get battered by winds and rain and snow and all those good things. So, we identified an area where we had some moisture creeping in, and it allowed us to basically sort of do a surgical approach to fix it.
And if you remember that image that Carter showed, thermal images, the windows are one of the areas that are brightest, and windows are one of the weak points in the building envelope. That's where a lot of the air and cold air, hot air can move through, either through your joints, your seals, or typically through the glass. And when you have enough of that thermal movement, you have condensation. Condensation causes mold, and mold is not good for your objects or for your people. Now, to remedy that, typically you will replace your windows, but before you make that move, do further analysis to see if there are other issues, like whether or not you need more insulation or a vapor barrier in your building. And when you do replace your glass, do consider bird-safe glass that would prevent bird strikes on your building. This is especially so when you have large expanses of glass on your institution.
Cycling infrastructure. The timing is great for this one in Chicago. This is the annual bike commuter challenge is happening right now, and the Field Museum has sort of been a proud participant of this one for a long time. And one of the things that gives us an edge in our category is that we have indoor bike parking. This is one of our lovely folks from the facilities department who set up a little area also just for some bikes that we share for museum staff community. But although this can be expensive in terms of, obviously it takes some space, it takes some political willpower to dedicate the space and to make sure it doesn't just get used for other things, but it really does set a tone that cyclists are welcome at your institution. And if you can add, you can see there's sort of like some lockers that are tucked around the corner in the picture, but also if you have any access to showers, trust me, everyone will appreciate it. And native landscapes. We put hard because this often ends up being a little more difficult than people think if you're going to do it sort of as a huge project for your entire grounds. The Field Museum spent about 3 years in some doing about 90,000 square feet, which is all of the sort of upper and lower terraces surrounding the building. We removed sod that had been in place for absolutely decades and decades and was not in great shape. And we put in over 100 species of native plants that we sort of carefully curated with folks to also make sure it aligned with plants from the region. We tried to highlight plants that had indigenous medicinal uses and to put some exhibition panels out that explain that. And then it also connects really well for the mission for many of our institutions. In our case, it's a natural history museum, so we put in a lot of plants that also function as habitat and can attract animals on the lakefront.
So speaking of natural landscapes and garden spaces, one thing that you can do is install a weather station in your space. On Bishop Museum campus, we have a weather station, a soil monitoring station, which allows us to work out how we can care for our garden and sustain it a little bit more. We have a native Hawaiian garden, and so these things really give us all that rich data to be able to manage things properly. In addition to this, that data also helps with integrated pest management, of looking at what trends are happening outside and when you may get more pests coming in, and then being able to remedy that, as well as better temperature and moisture control your exhibit and collection spaces. As I said, as one of the key things in sustainability is being able to reduce the amount of resources you use. And a key one of these in many institutions is your energy use. So being able to install solar panels across your institution is a really great way to start reducing your dependency on fossil fuel generated fuels, energy. There are two main ways you can do this. If you've got quite a bit of money, you can install the solar array yourself, and then you benefit from tax credits and the direct generation of that energy. Or your institution can engage in what is known as a power purchase agreement, where an external financer installs the solar array on your campus. And so they do all the upfront costs, and you buy that energy from them, similar to as you would with your utility company for normal electricity, but at a much reduced rate than you do for your electricity. And that's normally one that sort of lasts for about 10 to 20 years and just keeps going like that, so you don't have to bring that capital up front.
This is another solar solution for museums. It's being able to give tangible experiences to our visitors or vendors. We sometimes are able to solar power history tours, bring in solar powered charging stations to our African World Festival, or being able to off-grid gates or lights or stages for our different events. So being able to kind of save the world one outlet at a time is something that all museums can help to point to.
The wind power is another renewable resource, and it's becoming increasingly in the news. Thing about this strategy is we have to be really careful where we apply it. The picture on the right shows an installation in the Museum of Science in Boston. My firm, Fentus Architects, did a large master plan for the museum, and one of the objectives was to see how sustainable we could make the plan. And we worked with the museum to install basically a research unit on the roof that measures how much wind these microturbines can generate. So years later, the research is in, and unfortunately, this location does not have strong enough or constant enough wind pattern to generate any significant amount of energy. So, sad for this particular case, but yay for science.
LED retrofits. I just happened to be in a great spot to take a picture and get kind of a before and after on the left, where we were changing over basically old incandescent bulbs with LEDs. So the LEDs are the ones on the right. In addition to sort of, as you can see, they're clearly brighter, and it's also a more uniform, desirable light. These are using about 75% less energy use, and they should last 15 or 20 times as long, if not more, than the old ones. We'll find out with more years to come. Other advantageous elements of LEDs can be that because they take less time to replace, or excuse me, they last longer and don't need to be replaced as often, means you don't need as much labor to be changing light bulbs. It is a real hassle in a lot of museums where we have extra large sort of gallery halls. You've got to get people out there with like the cherry picker to kind of do these things. And the other great thing about them is that they are cooler, which means that you don't need to have your AC sort of offsetting them in the warmer months. And, these days, the light is, really desirable. And it's important to point that out for a lot of museums, because you might have had a experience with LEDs many years ago when they weren't the highest quality, but they have really come around.
Number 10, I'm pointing to a submeter in our main electrical room. This helps to measure all energy usage 24/7 in our museum. With that, we were able to also understand which electrical usage equipment is on different submeters. Eventually, we'll be able to understand and plug this into a computer program so that we can get a really clear understanding of what energy is being used, where there might be potential problems for our energy usage, how to start to manage and control our energy usage within the museum. So being able to just get a grasp on our air handling units at different points in the season, and knowing when to turn that on or not turn it on, so it affects our power factor for our electrical bills. Like, these are all really important things to help save our institution money.
And here's image 2 of sustainability professionals pointing at things. These are smart power strips. So these are really easy upgrades to do in predominantly office spaces. These are advanced power strips that stop overnight power draw in certain outlets. So if you shut down your computer at night, if it's in the control outlets, all of the peripheral outlets, such as your mobile phone charger or your screen, those outlets will shut off, and it will stop sort of phantom draw overnight of things on standby mode. So it's just a really easy way to save on energy that is kind of you're pointlessly using. So it's a really good way to quickly drop some of your energy.
And here's slide 3 of sustainability people pointing at things. This is a variable fan drive, and it was one of the first projects we implemented in 2015. It was very invisible because it's behind all of our mechanical systems, but it let us not run our motors 24/7. It was a relatively easy kind of project because it cost $7,000 per variable fan drive. But in a year, we were able to save the Wright Museum over $35,000 in our electrical bills. But this also kind of started the conversation of how do we make the invisible visible?
Another way, relatively easy way to reduce energy use across your campus is by retrofitting fridges and freezers and replacing them with energy efficient units, Energy Star rated ones. One really cool one that we have here at Bishop Museum is we had a fridge freezer still running on campus that was installed in 1943 and still running, still used. So I only imagine the amount of energy that uses. So we're actually retrofit that and installed it with a new energy efficient unit and really drops the electricity use.
The water bottle filling stations. We all know water is a really important amenity, obviously essential for life. We also know that plastic water bottles are one of the biggest plastic waste contributors. So anything you can do to get rid of the plastic bottles in your institution, and we know those can also be a revenue driver, but these water bottle filling stations really help you walk the walk and talk the talk and make that apparent for your guests. You can also help offset some of that plastic bottle water revenue by selling reusable water bottles within your gift shop. It's a great way that guests can use those on site. And if you still do need to sell water, I highly recommend the beverage industry has made huge advancements as of late. So there's a lot more aluminum or box water options available and out there.
Another thing that you can install on your campus are electric vehicle chargers. So we have a number on our campus of both regular level 2 chargers and DC fast chargers, which we're currently installing, which can charge an electric vehicle in around about 15 minutes. So it's really good to have these sort of things there, because not only does it allow your guests the ability to charge while they're visiting, but if you're in certain neighborhoods, you can actually provide access that areas that don't normally have access to electric vehicle chargers do. So you actually end up being a key utility for your community, which is an amazing thing to be able to do. One really exciting thing that we've been able to do with our DC fast chargers we're installing at Bishop Museum is we're working with a local artist to create a vinyl wrap around the units that that actually sort of speak to sustainability in Hawaii and makes it just a lot less utilitarian and really eye-catching. So we're really excited to be able to launch that and hope they're going to be finished next month.
Now, gray water is used water from your bathrooms, your kitchen sinks, showers, tubs, and washing machines. And they can be cleaned and have the organic material removed and then reused typically for landscape irrigation and also to flush your toilets. And what you see in the diagram is a living machine where we use sustainable means to clean the gray water in the form of bacteria that grows in the roots of plants. So the water goes in these systems, the bacteria consume the organic matter and cleans the water, and the water can be reused. Why do we do this? It lowers your total amount of water use in your facility. It also reduces the sewage water load that you send out to your municipal plants. And it's also a really cool demonstration project.
Another cool demonstration project is adding green stormwater infrastructure to your museum. Detroit is a legacy city, so that means that our combined sewer overflow flows into the river. So every time it rains, our sewage system floods the river. So by us being proactive to extreme weather events, we're able to capture water and retain it on our site. We've now completed 3 green stormwater infrastructure projects and are able to hold over 19,000 gallons of water every year. This particular project, we worked with community stakeholders and staff voices to be able to add an art component to our project. So now we have a 70-foot Sankofa, which is an Adinkra symbol that represents looking back to history before we move forward. The head of the Adinkra symbol, with the help of the elders in this community, points to the museum, which indicates that the learning starts here. And we were able to create these cute little postcards to also explain the story. We were able to work with the city of Detroit and the Nature Conservancy. And if you check out the website, detroitstormwater.org, you can find all the stormwater from many different Detroit projects.
Last sustainable picture of, well, sustainable officer pointing at a thing. The thing is a LEED plaque. LEED is one of the third-party certification systems out there. It's best known in this country. There are others that you see on the screen. And they provide a valuable third-party validation of the efforts in your institution. It sends a message to the community of your priorities. And it's also a potential targeted funding opportunity. As we pointed out earlier, we do have a toolkit that is now available, and that will walk you through how to make your museum and your exhibits more sustainable. And the network has also been working with the US Green Building Council to make LEED certification easier for museums. So stay tuned.
Well, thank you guys so much. That kind of covers our facilities portion of the presentation, or tour, if you will. We've listed several helpful links up here on the screen, so I hope you can get a chance or opportunity to check those out. And we are going to move on. So we kind of covered the infrastructure of your locations. Now we're going to kind of cover what happens inside. So we're going to have here 20 ideas on operations and administration, with Deborah kicking us off.
Yes, CO2 embodied, that is the energy that goes into extraction, manufacturing, transportation, basically all the energy that it takes to create the stuff in our buildings and that we have in our lives. And as we all know that carbon is a measure of the energy we use, and carbon is one of the main causes of climate change. So we all have to do what we can to reduce our carbon footprint, institutional-wise and personally. There are tools out there that help the construction industry measure embodied carbon in building materials, but there are also tools that you can use to measure your own and your household carbon emissions. And what you see, the graph on the right, is from the Berkeley lab, is what I did to measure how big my carbon footprint is.
Waste audits. A common sort of term that we use sometimes in our profession is that waste is a resource in the wrong place. And what a waste audit allows you to do is comb through your organization and find opportunities where you have either items that are going into the trash and then in the landfill that could have a second home, either within your museum or with external folks, maybe perhaps community partners. And it also allows you to just sort of tighten up and look for efficiencies. Waste audits are generally required in things like LEED, the operations and maintenance certification program. So that was where the Field Museum sort of went all in for our original effort. And what we found was that it allowed us to sort of pinpoint some areas where we had contamination problems, and we were able to sort of redistribute some of our recycling bins accordingly. And it was also just a great opportunity to add survey components as well, where we used folks from our green team and volunteers. And they just went out and they just talked to staff and they talked to guests, and we just sort of got an idea of kind of what people envisioned as a better way to sort of set up all these systems in our building. And related to the waste audit would be composting. So composting is, identified quite often as a really important way to address methane, which is a very significant greenhouse gas contributor, especially in the short term, which makes it extremely important. And composting also connects to food waste because it allows people to learn a little bit more about sort of where their food came from, where their food is ultimately going to go in terms of food scraps. And, you really don't don't want edible food whenever possible to be going even into a composting pile. So, it allows you to potentially redirect some of that food waste into food donation programs in your community. And it's also a way to connect perhaps to your mission if you've got any sort of connection to like soil health or those parts of the environment.
Great. And another piece of equipment that we think we all have in our offices are our printers. So if you work with an office large enough where you have shared printers, I think we've all been guilty about being at our desk, hitting print, getting distracted, forgetting you hit print, hitting print multiple times, or having a colleague accidentally recycle what you had printed because it sat there for too long. A really great thing that we implemented several years back was just that added extra printer control. So you hit print at your desk, and then you actually have to go walk over to the printer and hit print or release once you're there. So it prints when you get there. And it has really been amazing. Over the last 5-6 years, we've reduced our paper usage by over almost 800,000 pieces, as well as a cost savings of over $30,000 in terms of using less paper and ink. So that's a great way to become a little more green in your office, as well as saving you some money as well.
With this, so a lot of what we've just been talking about is looking at data and monitoring it. And a key part of sort of being able to have that data is then display it properly. So what we did, we've been working on at Bishop Museum is publicly facing dashboards. So these are graphical interfaces for data, which are often interactive and filterable. And so all of our dashboards are actually available, publicly accessible on our sustainability web pages, which means that we can be as transparent as possible with our energy and how much we actually pay for our energy and water and everything. So how much it actually costs to run a museum. And there are tons of different softwares available for various different portfolio managers, a widespread one that's freely accessible, as well as LEED have their own one. But you can build your own, which is what we did. And it's a really great way to be able to visualize what you're doing and the fact that you're actually making changes, and they can track how much of an impact you're making.
And speaking of tracking impact, you might as well just throw a party with your neighbors, which is what we did at the Wright Museum. We reached out to our neighbors to the west, the Michigan Science Center, and we threw a portfolio manager party where we brought in lunch, had volunteers come. That new portfolio manager brought all of our utility bills and just started putting numbers into portfolio manager. But we can also do this with our scope 1, 2, and 3 carbon emissions, and really just make it fun. And maybe we'll reach out to other museums since we're used to working on this Zoom online.
All right, sustainable purchasing. Really with sustainable purchasing, you want to be really mindful of not only thinking downstream, but also upstream as well. So just evaluating what are you buying, why are you buying it, how does it arrive, and where does it come from? Certainly supporting local is a great way to just get involved with your community, but also is really important in helping reduce carbon footprint and emissions in terms of how far that item travels to get to you. You also want to pay attention to how your items are arriving. This is particularly important, I think, in areas like the food service and retail operations. So it's not only what your guests see when they're shopping or eating at your facility, but it's behind the scenes and what comes with that. So highly encourage you to work with your vendors to help implement changes within how items arrive. And also, again, what items are you selecting? You really want to encourage those that, again, local, promote a sustainable lifestyle. So it's really a reflection of your brand and your efforts towards sustainability.
Another key element of sort of your admin and operations is actually making decisions and developing projects, not only just sustainability projects, but projects as a whole. And sometimes, maybe historically, there's been sort of at the last minute, oh, we need to think about sustainability. So we'll bolt it on at the end and greenwash the hell out of it, and it's going to be a great project, don't you worry. But if we can actually put in sustainability and sustainable thinking at the start of a project and use that as the basis of every decision and every idea and project done at a museum, it makes it just so much more robust and successful project with regards to sustainability. We've been developing Bishop Museum a sustainability decision-making sort of matrix and framework, which looks at societal, ecological, and economic sustainability of a project, allows you to rank it and score it, and then be assessed by a senior management team for their thoughts, as well as also asking like strategic questions from across the museum. It really makes it great for like transparency in decision making, like why are things given a go ahead or no go ahead, and also means that you can develop a much more robust and structured project that actually accounts for every area of your museum instead of just like little siloed areas. We're still developing this, but it looks like it's going to be a really cool tool to use.
Right, and greeting facility rentals. We all know that events and facility rentals can be a huge revenue driver for your institution, but they also unfortunately can result in a lot of waste. So I highly encourage you to take a look at your event rentals and how you're operating those, and try and move towards zero waste. Try to eliminate disposable materials where possible, choosing reusable dishware, and where you can't, try and use the 100% compostable items, as Carter talked about, if you have composting at your museum. But also otherwise make it easy for guests to know where to dispose of their items, so that hopefully they can be composted, reused, recycled in some manner or fashion. Certainly giveaways as well. If you're doing that for your event, highly encourage those reusable water bottles. If you have your water bottle filling stations, you get wins all around in that area. But again, look for local vendors, and also look at your menus. Is there a way to make them greener? Can you reduce the amount of beef or meat that you're highlighting in those, and really kind of try and choose those local plant items based menus? And always also make it fun. Guests are going to lean towards what you're showing them. So really trying to highlight those greener options is a great way for them to get involved and also realize that they make an impact with the choices that they're making for their event.
Yeah, and in making it fun, all the different departments are helping to think about sustainability within all of our processes and deliverables. And so the museum gift store at one point has started to help make cloth bags and paper bags rather than plastic. This is great because it starts to give more tangible indicators that we are going green. And if all the different departments start to think about that, like the experiences of not being in an oil-based society is expanded.
And as Leslie said, people are more and more used to using reusable bags. Depending on the state you're in, you might have a city or a municipal tax associated with that. So it's a habit that guests are used to. So encourage that, and don't be afraid to get rid of your paper and plastic bags and just have only reusable bags as an option. It's a great revenue driver. And then you can also get creative. I mean, we know some people may not need that bag, but you can go into your back room and grab a box for them, or something of that nature. And so highly encourage you to make that move if you haven't. And then also just look at, your front-facing items that you're having for sale. Again, anything where you can promote the sustainable lifestyle choices. It's all about educating the guests and having them realize that they can make an impact with their life choices.
One of the ways to be able to have influence within your institution is to advocate for our sustainability budget. Our institution does a zero-based budget, so we're able to have budget allocated each fiscal year. Some of this money is going towards our infrastructure, improving our infrastructure for sustainability, but also being able to convene technical consultants like architects, landscape architects, engineers, or being able to learn from staff field trips, having special projects, and being sure to have contingency to make sure that all of these projects can be done well.
So again, so we're trying to get sustainability sort of built in to your institution is developing policies around sustainability, as well as any policies for other things, making sure that they are also sustainable, or at least mention some degree sustainable practice. So what's sort of a really good way of looking at this is within the policy, explain what this policy actually means to your institution, the wider strategic framework it fits in, what other institutions and large scale things like state and global level does this actually fully align with, what you actually aim to do within it. And then what I think is probably the most important part of it is who is responsible for what, which roles are responsible for different aspects of delivering this, from the highest level to the lowest level, to sort of the boots on the ground staff, to your contractors, who's responsible for what. And that really does give that sort of sense of ownership, and that it is everyone's duty to enact this.
And in addition to that, you can think about policies if, especially if your museum is large enough and it's got sort of general counsel and staff that have some capacity to be able to look further out into things that are influencing everything from your institution to the larger environment to your communities. But it's a chance to sort of engage within your institution to see whether or not sometimes it's appropriate for a museum to actually take a position on something that is being debated in the public sphere, or to potentially weigh in and be a resource for policymakers that are interested in taking the sort of objective science that we try to practice in our institutions as well. So on the right, this is a flow chart that we spent a fair amount of time and energy trying to put together. Successfully, I think, with our general counsel, who was really super helpful at helping us learn how to kind of walk the line so that we were sort of, being ethical about this practice, and also that we were being inclusive and we were sort of making sure that, we were really playing to the museum's strengths.
Deborah, you're on mute.
Sorry, pandemic responses. We're all very familiar with what we had to go through in the past 2 years in responding to COVID. The LEED rating systems and the CDC have lots of useful information on how you train your staff, but also how you train your cleaning personnel and your visitors. One of the things that we did look at was ultraviolet germicidal irradiation that could be retrofitted into your mechanical systems that will clean the air before it's recycled into the system.
Greening exhibits. So for sure, please do check out this brand new materials toolkit that a lot of our fantastic colleagues in the network and in AAM have put together. But we also like to sort of think about it in sort of not just a grassroots sort of element, but just the way you can sort of bake into your museum's culture, being as green as possible when you are putting exhibits together, and also decommissioning and or sort of taking them apart and figuring out what the next life might be. On the left, I just kind of like this picture because it just shows to the extent that I think a lot of museum folks are just so used to being as creative as possible and reuse. This is just a bunch of the folks from our exhibitions department years ago that were in the habit of just going through the dumpsters a couple times a week to see what sort of materials might be out there that had been overlooked in a process that might have, a second life inside the building. In general, I kind of describe it to people as it's an inputs and an outputs sort of concept that you're trying to think about. So think about the things that you're going to be using as you construct the exhibit and whether they will have a second life, and then also whether or not they are been sustainably, ethically sourced. Try to go for like rapidly renewable materials like bamboo as opposed to like exotic hardwoods that are connected to deforestation. Think about modular design so that if something breaks, things always do, you can replace just a small part of an exhibition sort of component as opposed to needing to get rid of a huge sort of piece of the exhibition for further repair. That will also make your guests and your executives much happier, believe me. And the Field Museum, because we're large enough and we have enough exhibits that are going in and out in terms of ones that we build and ones that we send on the road and bring in, we do try to also work with the smaller museums in Chicago. And when we can, we'll lend them display cases for their own use that are sort of for short-term exhibitions. And that's been certainly well received, and we're happy to do it.
This is one of the more potentially controversial ideas on this list of greening your board and greening your endowments. So sort of a two-part thing really here. So one, we're sort of greening the board is getting like champions on the board who are pushing for sustainability, sustainable practice on your museum. So that kind of encourages the senior management team and staff at the museum to be implementing sustainable policies, which is always helpful when it's being pushed from the highest levels. It makes your job so much easier. But also bringing the board with that as well is limiting who can be on the board. So there are no conflicts of interest, that you don't have big oil money coming in and then you're doing exhibits on climate change that maybe seen as being pushed in a certain way or not talking about certain things. And it's sort of assuming that the endowments that you have coming in are from sources or are invested in a way that are fully aligned with the ethics and mission of the museum. So we're beyond reproach, and that we can say that we're doing everything with the best intent in mind.
All right. Well, thank you guys. That was a lot of great information on what we're doing inside our buildings to promote sustainable practices. We have several resource links up on the screen for you guys. So again, highly recommend checking that out. And we will kind of move to our third bucket, which is culture. So again, we covered the building. We covered what happens inside the building. Now we're going to cover how we interact with our team members and with our guests.
So one of the first things with this to sort of be encouraging a sustainable culture within your museum is actually having a direction and sort of doing robust planning and goals so everyone knows what's going on and knows where we're going. So Bishop Museum, we worked on actually engaging with staff at all levels and all areas of the museum with interviews at the start to understand where everyone thinks we are with regards to sustainability, where they envision it going. And then there's that agency and buy-in that people have been included in that planning. And then after that, we cut down to cross-departmental working groups to actually really dig deep and work out like, what can we do and what do we want to do over the next 5 years? And a key part of sort of building this is understanding what pillars is your sustainability, your institution built on? What are the key areas that that are aligned with your main museum goals and sort of vision? And how can sort of sustainability be built on that? And research and conservation, operations, physical campus, there's loads of different ways and it's all bespoke to you. And one thing to do in that is also make sure that you have measurable and quantifiable goals. And if you can align metrics with this, so you can actually measure your progress towards them, that is a great reporting tool and really does justify the work you're doing and allows you to get more funding and more support for it and sort of just really understand what's going on.
Like commuter teams. I think I alluded earlier that right now we're in the middle of a 2-week bike challenge that they have in Chicago every year. And we took advantage of this to create a field museum bike commuter team about 14 years ago. And we've won in our category 13 out of 14 years, which we are probably unnecessarily proud of, but it really does bring people together. We really enjoy having group rides, which can be an opportunity to help get people sort of comfortable and feeling good about biking on the street. People that are perhaps new to your city, might need a little bit of a boost to get out there and feel okay doing it and learn some tips and tricks on the way. We also do, because we have so many people that are very adept and handy in our exhibitions department, especially, we'll do a bike repair sort of event when we can pull it off. And it gives people an opportunity to bring in their old bikes and get them tuned up. And it's also just a great, sort of morale boosting and camaraderie kind of event. And sometimes what we're also able to do with that is that we're able to salvage some bikes that might otherwise have been just sort of disposed of. We get them tuned up and then we can donate them either to staff or there are some wonderful nonprofits in probably most cities at this point that do work to get them to the hands of people that need them.
Part of adding to community is being able to talk about food. This is actually a disguised green stormwater infrastructure project where we needed to remove some of the concrete to do water shedding into the soil. But with that soil, we were able to start to create community gardens. And I'll talk a little bit more about it, but we are starting to now work with our learning and engagement educational departments to also build on top of some of this infrastructure.
Staff field trips. I am a big fan of the concept of seeing is believing. And so in a lot of cases, some of the things that we've been trying to work on, we get to a certain point where it really is helpful to get out of our building and to see sort of what the external systems are that, we're trying to either, impact or improve upon. So I would take generally trips at least once a year that are either to sort of a recycling facility, MRF. Kayak trips are also very, very popular. This is Chicago's Bubbly Creek and some of our old sort of industrial legacy areas. And it can be really great for people that haven't done this and to actually see in many cases that a lot of progress has been made in Chicago and probably a lot of other parts of the country where they have cleaned up the water quite a bit. And in the middle, that's a compost site that we visit, which can be a real eye opener for folks that are used to composting, maybe in like a community garden space, but to see what it looks like when it's done, as they say, at like a commercial composting scale with windrows.
Part of the policy changes that all of us as sustainability officers are helping to implement deals with being able to change people's hearts and minds. And so we develop prototypes to help provide input and feedback from staff members as policies change. So this is just an example of some of those prototypes where we took a waste bin, covered it in paper, so to make them into recycle bins. And now everyone at the museum has recycle bins at their desks with waste stations, so there's more recycling going on.
Another sort of really good thing, sort of like aligning everyone to what you're doing, is developing sustainability messaging. So actually having standardized phrases and sort of text that you all use as an institution to make sure that you're all singing from the same hymn sheet, so to speak. So having a commitment that staff can sign up to understand what sustainability means to your museum and what you expect of your staff. And then sort of having like a vision that can be used to go out on websites or any sort of external audiences, press releases and such. And then actually having a larger, longer statement that can be used in grants. So obviously a lot of grants are focusing on sustainability now, and a lot of projects do touch on sustainability, even if not run from a sustainability department as such. And so having like a boilerplate piece of text that people can use means that, again, you're all just pulling in the same direction and there is no ambiguity about what direction you're going in.
Green teams. I think green teams are one of those wonderful things that many institutions have, but they don't necessarily do a lot of external messaging about it. But the advantage of them is that they're typically free in the sense that it doesn't really cost anything internally to put one together. Obviously, there's some staff capacity issues potentially and a little bit of time. But what I've found at the Field Museum, and I think a lot of other folks do as well, is that what a green team does is it allows you to sort of reach out across your staff and kind of break down some silos, and you can recruit people that are very passionate about either very specific things that they bring some expertise to the table with as well, or they're just in general interested in the topic of sustainability and having their workplace reflect a more sort of environmental ethic. So the connectivity element is fantastic. And it's also a really great instrument to retain a lot of knowledge in your institution. So as people sort of come and go, and maybe you lose one champion, but another one comes in, that person doesn't have to kind of reinvent the wheel and start everything from scratch. They've got sort of a network of folks that are well positioned. And although you don't want everybody to feel like it's the green team's responsibility to do everything, it can be a definite asset.
And I would absolutely agree with Carter. We have our own internal green team, but we are in a position where we work with 100 different cultural attractions throughout the US, and we're often participate in their green teams as well. Because getting that cross-departmental representation and also some of your partners or contractors that you use can definitely bring in added and different insight. And that's really what's so great about it's not only it's building a community within your team members that are all very passionate about what they do and definitely bring in different insights. The IT team definitely has a different perception or perspective than perhaps maybe your facilities operations or HR team, and the impacts that you can make That's certainly one I wouldn't have known about printer controls, but our IT team was like, no, we can figure something out. So it's a great way to, yeah, just share additional topics of knowledge.
The Wright Museum is fortunate that there's so many different local and regional nonprofits and interest groups focused on sustainability. So as a museum, as people that like to convene other people, we convene often different community voices. So this is with our African World Festival or some of our green events that we've had at the museum, being able to give out vendor tables to our partners so that people can hear not just from our voice, but from other voices. And we encourage anyone in your city to look up who your potential partners might be.
And exactly as Lily said, and as we spoke to green teams, they can be such a powerful force for change at your institution. So it's really important that you nurture them as well. You can't set them and forget them. And you want to make sure that you're getting feedback from not only those that, want to join the team, but from your other team members as well. Because it's important that they feel heard or can make those recommendations and suggestions. And then it's about communication. Share the why or share the why not if they made a suggestion and it was something that couldn't be implemented, either due to a time or cost factor. I think it is really important to have them understand that their voice matters in this as well. And it's always great, if you could do surveys with your team. We always like to do fun contests. So rewards and recognitions, a great way to recognize your green team. But you want to make sure that you're walking the walk and talking the talk with your rewards and recognition programs as well. Something that we do when we onboard our new team members, everybody gets a reusable water bottle. Again, just kind of setting that tone for when a team member first starts that, we try and dispose of as little as possible. So, here's your reusable water bottle, here's your reusable utensil set, something that they can keep at their desk. And we always like to make things fun. And we like to encourage our teams, by having parties and potlucks and things like that. But again, just be mindful, certainly thinking about Halloween, all that plastic wrap just kind of makes you cringe. So if you're doing potlucks or fun things like that, take a page from Carter's book and try and find compostable items that you can celebrate. Also in terms of contests, if you do prizes, we kind of like to do reusable prizes. So it's, you get your name on a trophy that rotates throughout. In this case, it is a wrestling belt, but it's fun. People get to keep on to it, hold on to it, and something that obviously stays out of the landfill and trash. And then, yes, participating in sustainability organizations. So it's not only just your green team at your institution, a great way to share and network your knowledge is by getting involved in some of these sustainability organizations. Everyone on this panel here today, we are all part of the Environment and Climate Network with AAM. And I'm so honored that I get to work with these guys and, it's just additional resources that I can call if I have a question, and it'll really just help you achieve your goals faster.
Mission and community building. So a lot of our institutions are just really, really good at convening folks that are outside in our communities. We're generally speaking seen as kind of politically neutral. So it allows us to be, really effective connectors and bridge builders. And if you've got a mission that is, something that lends itself to the convening itself, it can also be just a really powerful way to make a difference. So the example that I put here was the city of Chicago achieved LEED Platinum status a couple of years ago. And as you might imagine, this was something that was a fairly high level sort of activity that involved, like the mayor's office and things like that. And what we heard from our community partners was that they really wanted to see some of the more grassroots and community elements highlighted as part of this. And we said, well, heck, we'll do it ourselves. And we invited folks that were from the EPA. We invited people from almost every nonprofit, environmental and community organization we could think of. I think we had almost 100 represented at this event, but we pulled in about 1,500 folks with only a couple of weeks worth of notice. That's how excited people were to really see the Field Museum step up and do this. And then for good measure, we took advantage of some great contacts and we turned it into a bona fide zero waste event. And we were able to actually divert 95% of the waste that day. So it was a really great event for everybody. Oh, and Earth Day, Earth Overshoot Day. I love this. So, you know, everybody is familiar with this lovely big blue ball here. That is the Earth. And on April 22nd every year, it is Earth Day. It is a fantastic, easy opportunity for museums to just sort of like jump on the bandwagon, at least for a day, and highlight things that are happening in terms of things that are good for the planet. I always take advantage of it to try to invite in external speakers. On the left, it was just an amazing author of a book called Lentil Underground. I mean, you know, in Chicago, we're not that connected quite often to our food sources. And it was just a great opportunity to catch somebody who was, you know, really pioneering a lot of fantastic work out there at the University of California. One of Michael Pollan's students. Highly recommend the book. And we change it up every year. Now, Earth Overshoot Day, on the other hand, is a little more kind of specific, and it's a great opportunity to maybe do a slightly more deep dive. And what Earth Overshoot Day represents is it is the day every year at which the Earth has essentially reached its biocapacity limit. And unfortunately, as you probably could gather from the graph, whereas when they started doing this in 1971, they thought that the Earth was going through we were using the Earth's resources essentially by about December 20th every year. And they've changed the sort of methodology, and I think it's gotten even more rigorous and more precise every single year. But now they think that we're going through essentially the Earth's resources by July 29.
A big part of sort of being able to talk about sustainability and get people on board and get your guests to understand what sustainability is actually, and what you're doing, is making sustainability web pages. So having that front and center on your digital presence, so people understand that it is a key thing that you're working on. And so you can talk about some of the initiatives you've done on it, what it means to you, what the future is. And then if people want to be able to reach out, it gives them access to your sustainability team. This is a really great way to actually sort of explore this and bring this out to the public. We are actually putting together a full list of all the institutions that have sustainability web pages. So if you email your institution's sustainability webpage link to the email at the bottom of the screen there, the Environment and Climate Network is trying to put this together so everyone has resources and understands what's out there and how we can sort of all become a little bit better and see what we can put on our web pages. One of the key things for sort of pushing forward sustainability is actually having somebody in a sustainability position. Shocking. Previously or historically, in many places, sustainability was basically delegated to the person who either asked the most questions about recycling or moved the slowest in a board meeting at some point. So you get like, all right, you're in charge of sustainability now, and they have to do their own job and then a little bit of sustainability as well. And then when they get overwhelmed in their own job and actually have to do the thing they're paid for, the sustainability falls to the side, doesn't get done. If they leave, then everyone forgets that that was the person doing sustainability, and then no one's doing sustainability. It just never allows you to build any sort of momentum with it. Whereas actually having somebody in a position, it allows that dedicated work. Therefore, you've got people focusing on grants. There are so many grants out there for sustainability that if you have someone in place for it, writing on those, you've got a greater success chance of actually getting this and being able to get more money coming into your institution and making more initiatives happening. It allows them to actually coordinate things across the museum and actually allow you to build that team. And also means that if things are starting to change in the wider world, you can be ahead of it instead of, oh no, now we need to scramble and change things. And there was an amazing webinar hosted by AAM that's at the link on this webpage, on this slide, that sort of talks about the value of having sustainability officers in museums. So it is a great thing to do. So always try and consider leveraging that in your institution. And also, say you have somebody in that position, you have a team of interested people in it, training them and actually being able to build that capacity is huge. There are a number of areas where you can sort of are accessible for training. So the 2030 Districts Network for museums is a great area for training resources. Being certified as a LEED Green Associate allows that sort of certification and training that allows you to sort of really implement great things for sustainability. Something we've been involved in at the Bishop Museum is the Key Futures project, which is a sustainability training thing with museums from across the world, which not only does sort of lecture-based training, but also mentorship, support and forums to really build that community of sustainability professionals in cultural institutions and museums.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. That was wonderful. We have some resource links again that really focus on culture. So I highly recommend you guys checking that out. The Sustainability Officers webinar that Chris mentioned is also listed here. So if you have an hour within your schedule, that's a great program. All right, well, we covered our building, we covered what happens inside the building, we covered our teams. Now we're going to kind of cover what happens outside our building and how can we engage with our local communities and raise awareness and spread all the wonderful work that you guys are doing.
Presenting about policy issues. I think we discussed a little bit earlier about how museums can often be a really fantastic resource for elected officials and other government agencies, because we do have a lot of fantastic expertise and we are almost always held in very high regard by these government agencies who know that, you know, we really do believe in the science and being as objective and as positive as possible. So just a few examples here of where, because of this position, I've been able to go out and talk about recycling and sort of waste reporting challenges in the city of Chicago. This is a Green Council group that was created by one of the communities represented by Alder here in Chicago. And then on the right, these were a couple of examples of some direct presentations that I was able to make for the city council's Environmental Protection and Energy Committee. So we tried to focus on the importance of nature-based solutions, because this, you know, again, sort of connects well to the Field Museum's mission, but it really is something that only happened because, you know, we do have people that are well-placed and recognized as being experts within the broader institution. And then connected to that are joining larger advocacy circles. So, you know, while it's great that if I'm able to go and speak for my 2 minutes very quickly, often at one of these city council meetings where there is an actual ticking clock and they do cut you off abruptly, having an opportunity to do more of what we're doing here today for you and work, you know, like with a much broader advocacy group is the best. You know, I mean, you get an opportunity to get a much more diverse range of viewpoints and people and experiences, which is awesome. On the left here, just one example of some plastic-free water legislation that was being pushed in Chicago. The Field Museum joined with the Shedd Aquarium, the Illinois PERG and the Illinois Environmental Council. I mean, we had just a fantastic group. There were some local schools that got involved, and it was just a fantastic way for all of us to really showcase both our strengths and to demonstrate that the sum was really much greater than the parts.
Another great thing you can do is institute sustainability programming across your institution. Obviously, having sustainability messaging in exhibits is one thing, and sort of having it broadcast to your guests, but actually having them engage and being part of these in sort of interactive programming is a huge thing for engaging with your community. One thing that we've implemented at Bishop Museum is a sustainability scavenger hunt. So it's for our younger guests to explore the campus and explore the different elements of sustainability and what we do on our campus, all rooted in sort of place-based knowledge and Hawaiian culture. And we're actually looking to try and develop this into a digital sustainability scavenger hunt. So we use less resources having to print these off, and we sort of focus a lot on sort of food resilience and other such things. So it's really exciting to be able to bring people outside and connect them with sustainability.
In speaking to programming, The Wright Museum has been working with their learning and engagement department. And one of the projects that we have started is make and takes of biodegradable pots. So we save some of the newspapers that come through the museum, cut them up, and bring in soil and black-eyed peas, which ties to the African diaspora, which also ties to our mission. And it's just this great opportunity. There's constantly kids coming back with their little plants to the museum to show us that they're growing. And this is a great, easy, fun way to engage the different departments and the visitors with ideas of environment. One other project that we did at the Wright Museum was we found 3 dead and dying trees on our campus. And instead of mulching them or adding them to landfill, we diverted this wood and created urban lumber by milling it and drying it and storing it with our partners across the street to the north, the College for Creative Studies. We created a whole wood workshop during COVID and had community scholarships for both the college art students and community artists. And the amount of work that they created was incredible. The Wright Museum created the curriculum based in history and environmental justice issues. And the students interpreted these lectures and the readings into art objects, wood objects that told stories about our lectures and our curriculum. And it created this whole exhibit. So it's really exciting because in the next year, we're going to have like the lowest carbon footprint traveling exhibit because we're going to be walking these art projects over to the Wright Museum to display another exhibit on all of this work. And we worked with about 90 community artists with this project with panel discussions. We created a treeposium. If you're interested, check out our website, dtree.me. And I suggest any museum be able to think about partnering with art schools, art and design schools.
So one way we tell the sustainability story is through signage, either actual signage or as parts of exhibits. The picture on your right is an interactive exhibit of the Nature Research Center in the North Carolina Museum of Sciences that our office Ventures Architects designed for the museum. In addition to what you say on your signs, make sure too how your signs are created and manufactured. As we said earlier, excuse me, the toolkit has a lot of useful information. It's a good resource for museums to look for when you're thinking of how you make sustainable exhibits and signage.
Another sign that you are promoting sustainability within your institution is thinking about how people arrive to your institution. Sometimes we are able to bring in bike valet. So that is like coat check, but for your bike. We post signs up to make sure people know that they can ride their bikes to our festivals or to our different events. And there are people and volunteers that will just watch people's bicycles. And when they leave, they will check out the bicycles. But there's such a huge bike culture here in Detroit with people decorating their bikes that it becomes this really fun thing, a very low carbon footprint of how one thinks to arrive to the museum. And there's just so much excitement about this sort of event that comes and is now at the front entrance of your different events. So yay for bike valet.
That's great. And I think as we kind of touched upon earlier, having staff field trips and things like that. And, certainly a lot of the institutions represented here do talks and events, but it's always great when you can bring the community not only into your institution, but outside of your institution too. So they can take part of some of the research work that you're doing. We have it as no cost and easy to medium, but it can really be as easy or as complex, I guess, as you can make it. Several locations, if you're close to a river or corridor with the lakes, you can do something informal as just, getting a face group together and garnering your social media following to encourage people to participate in cleanup events like that. Or you can establish a citizen science programs where I know the Denver Zoo has a fabulous one called the Front Range Pika Project, where it gets the community involved in their conservation work for the pika, and it just helps people really stay engaged with the work that you're doing, and it's a great way to promote those programs as well. And that being said, you also want to be transparent about it. So share your progress and share what's going on. We talked a little bit about dashboards. But really use every message you can. Sustainability, if you don't have that represented on your webpage, you really should have a section dedicated to that. And that goes along with any updates that you're communicating, whether it be through signage that Deborah touched upon within your institution. We like to use in retail signs that let guests know that their purchase matters. And we've saved X amount, as much as you can quantify, to share that with guests so that they know that their choices matter. That's certainly through that. Through any newsletters that you do as well. It's always great to have a sustainability corner so you can share the progress that you're making. And certainly social media. We all know that during COVID, with institutions having to be shut down, that that was a wonderful thing for their social media channels, because a lot of people wanted to stay engaged. They really view museums and cultural attractions as a really solid source for information. You're trusted. So share what you can on there. And I love this. I'm going to call out Carter. One of their, I think this was, it was Twitter, posted that they actually had little blow up dinosaurs run around and show all the great, wonderful work Carter has helped implement at the Field Museum on how it's sustainable. So again, you always want to make it fun. I think I've watched this 1,000 times. It's amazing. And don't be afraid to also use your social media channels for not only information sharing, but for outreach and ways people can get engaged. The example here from the Shed Aquarium was looking for people to sign a petition to support the Reducing Waste in National Parks Act. And that was a great way for them to share their progress as well. You can see it's amazing. They're only 70 letters away from their goal of 1,000 at the time of that posting. So it's a wonderful way for people to stay engaged and also get active.
And last but not least, with number 60, an easy way to kind of be able to understand how sustainability fits into your museum, not just as one department, but as many voices, is to convene a green town hall. So we're about to convene our second green town hall this November, but Neil Barclay, our CEO and president, and our board chair president, Eric Peterson, both were speakers at our green town hall. And we're able to hear and see actual people who are really interested, from anything from beekeeping to stormwater management to off-gridding, community solar. And it became this whole dialogue of how do we start to create guiding principles with our stakeholders to make sure that all of this is embedded into the foundation of our green plans, like Chris was talking about. This kind of event probably helped also to have our board of trustees and our executive leadership team be able to have sustainability be one of the main pillars now in the Wright Museum. So it's really exciting to sort of build the infrastructure to be able to continue this sort of work and get feedback to make sure we're all on the right path as we green our museums collectively.
Well, that was amazing, guys. Thank you so much. I loved our 60 Sustainable Ideas tour. Hopefully that everyone here found it helpful. And you have some, thank you for listening, tips and tricks that you can take home with you. We have our contact information up on the screen. So if you guys have any questions, follow-up questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to any one of us. I know this wonderful, amazing panel here is happy to share their knowledge and help you move your sustainable goals forward. So with that, I just want to say thank you so much to Deborah, Chris, Leslie, Carter. You guys are rock stars. So much great information. So thank you for sharing your time and expertise with us. So, all right. Thank you, everyone.